Welcome to the Whispering Historian, where the past speaks softly, the candles burn low, and history becomes something you can rest inside for a while. Tonight, we are going to a medieval village in the middle of winter. Not the castle, not the battlefield, not the great hall where kings make dramatic speeches and everyone has suspiciously clean hair. We are going somewhere quieter, smaller, colder, and much more honest. Before we begin tonight's story, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Then, get comfortable, dim the lights, and let's step quietly into the past. We are going to a little cluster of timber houses, muddy lanes, frozen fields, smoky rooms, hungry animals, damp wool, tired hands, and people who are doing their very best not to die before spring. This is the first thing to understand about medieval winter. It is not simply cold weather. It is a long negotiation with everything that can run out. Food can run out, firewood can run out, candles can run out, patience can run out, hope can run out, and the entire village is basically a collection of people trying to keep all of those things going until the days grow longer. Outside, the lane between the cottages is frozen into awkward ridges where mud hardened overnight. When it thaws in the afternoon, it will become mud again. Medieval roads, if we are being generous, are less roads than suggestions made by people who owned boots. In summer they are dusty or muddy. In winter they are ice, slush, ruts, puddles, animal waste, and the kind of surface that makes every errand feel like a small moral test. Your house is made of timber, wattle, daub, thatch, and constant maintenance. The walls are not perfectly sealed. The wind knows where you live, it finds the cracks, it whispers under the door, it slips through the roof. The thatch keeps out most of the rain if it is in good condition, but that is a phrase doing a great deal of work. Every storm is an inspection. Every leak is a problem. Every repair requires time, material, and hands that are already needed somewhere else. The village is waking now, not all at once, but in sounds. A cough through a wall, a pig complaining with the confidence of someone who has never paid rent, a child crying, someone chopping wood, someone cursing because the chopping wood is too damp, a door scraping open, a bucket hitting frozen ground. The soft, unhappy noise of people discovering again that morning has arrived and brought chores. If you think winter is a quiet season in the medieval countryside, that is only because fields are not being plowed every day. The truth is that winter changes work. It does not remove it. Animals still need feeding, tools need repairing, firewood needs cutting, hedges need tending, grain needs grinding, ale needs brewing, cloth needs mending, roofs need checking, ditches need clearing when they are not frozen solid. The body works differently in winter, slower perhaps, but it still works. And everything takes longer because your hands are cold. That detail matters. Cold hands are not atmospheric. Cold hands are an economic problem. Cold fingers drop things, tear skin, slow spinning, slow sewing, make knots difficult, make milking unpleasant, make every task require more attention. You may have gloves if you are fortunate, but gloves are not magic, and they are not always practical. Much of medieval survival happens through fingers, tying, pulling, carrying, cutting, kneading, feeding, cleaning, mending. Winter attacks the fingers first. The hearth is the heart of the house, but not in the sentimental way people say that now when they are discussing open-plan kitchens. The hearth is heat, light, cooking, drying, smoke, ash, danger, and survival. It is where the pot hangs. It is where wet shoes steam. It is where children crowd too close, and adults tell them to move back. It is where stories are told because there is nowhere else warm enough to sit. It is also the reason your eyes sting and your lungs are not exactly grateful. Many peasant homes do not have chimneys in the way you would prefer. Smoke rises, wanders, gathers beneath the roof, and escapes through holes or openings, if the building is kind. This means your cozy winter interior is also a smoky box. The walls are darkened, the rafters smell of soot. Your clothes absorb everything. Your hair absorbs everything. If you're imagining candlelit romance, lower the glamour and add coughing. Still, the smoke has its uses. It helps cure meat. It discourages some insects. It becomes part of the house's personality. After a while, perhaps you stop noticing it as much. Human beings are astonishingly good at accepting discomfort when the alternative is freezing. You are not alone in the house. You are almost never alone. A typical household may include parents, children, grandparents, servants, apprentices, lodgers, and sometimes animals brought inside when the weather is harsh enough. Privacy is scarce. Warmth is shared because warmth has to be shared. Beds may be shared. Blankets are shared. Space is shared. Germs are also shared with medieval enthusiasm. This is where the modern mind begins to struggle. You want a room, a door, a bed that is yours, a bathroom, a way to wash your hands with warm water and pretend that civilization is stable. The medieval village offers you a bucket, a corner, a field, a stream, if it is not frozen, in a very relaxed attitude toward smells, because everyone smells, not in exactly the same way, but enough that judgment has limited practical value. Winter makes cleanliness harder. Washing clothes requires water, labor time, and drying space. Bathing is not impossible, but it is not convenient. Hot water means fuel. Fuel means work. Work means time. Time means daylight. Daylight means winter laughs at you, so people wash strategically faces, hands, maybe feet when needed. Linen underclothes, if you have them, are changed more often than outer garments. Cleanliness exists, but it is not the modern clean white bathroom version. It is practical, partial, and negotiated. Now step outside. The village sits in a landscape that is both familiar and alien. Fields spread out around it in strips. Hedges mark boundaries. A church tower, if there is one, rises above the roofs. Beyond the cultivated land, there may be woods, marsh, common pasture, and places that feel less managed. The whole world is smaller because movement is harder. Your village is not just where you live. It is your weather report, your social network, your workplace, your market, your emergency service, your news feed, your alarm system, and your witness. Everyone knows your business. This is not because medieval villagers are uniquely nosy, though many of them probably are. It is because survival requires awareness. If a neighbor's cow is sick, that matters. If someone has extra firewood, that matters. If a widow is running short of grain, that matters. If strangers are on the road, that matters. Community is not a soft word here. It is infrastructure, and it can be exhausting, because the same village that helps you also watches you. It notices if you miss church. It notices if your fence is broken. It notices if your daughter talks too long with someone by the well. It notices if you borrow and do not repay. It notices if your bread is underweight, if your ale is weak, if your animals stray, if your temper is bad, if your grief is too loud, if your joy is suspiciously large. The village remembers. The village has no mute button. But in winter, the village also gathers closer. People visit one another when the weather allows. They share work indoors. They mend nets, repair harnesses, spin wool, carve handles, patch shoes, sharpen tools, tell stories, gossip, pray, complain, and stretch the evening as far as the fire will let them. Winter evenings are long, very long, so long that time itself feels different. Without electric light, the night is not a backdrop. It is a presence. Candles are precious. Rushlights are cheaper, smellier, and less impressive. A rushlight is made by taking the pith of a rush, dipping it in fat or grease, and burning it for a small wavering light that is better than darkness and worse than almost everything else. A good candle is a small luxury. A beeswax candle is an even greater one, often associated with churches and wealthier households. Most peasants live in a world where light is rationed by cost. So when the sun goes down, the house changes. Work that requires good light becomes difficult. People move closer to the fire. Faces become orange and shadowed. The ceiling disappears into smoke. The cold presses against the walls. The animals settle. Someone tells a story that has been told before, because winter does not demand new entertainment every night. It demands enough familiarity to make the dark less large. The stories matter, not because peasants are quaint or simple, but because stories organize fear. A tale about a saint, a foolish priest, a greedy lord, a haunted road, a clever wife, a bad neighbor, a wolf, a miracle, a giant, or a devil is a way of putting shape around danger. In a world where disease appears without warning, crops fail, childbirth kills, and the weather can ruin an entire year. Stories give events a moral pattern, even when life itself refuses to. Religion is woven through the winter. The church calendar gives structure to the cold months. Advent, Christmas, Saints' Days, Candlemas, Lent approaching in the distance. These are not just spiritual markers, they are social and seasonal ones. Feast days puncture the hardship. Fasting days control appetite and community discipline. Holy days give people a reason to gather. The church bell tells time to those without clocks. The churchyard holds the dead. The church itself may be the largest, strongest, and coldest building most villagers know. Christmas in a medieval village is not a single morning of wrapping paper and cinnamon marketing. It is a season of worship, food if there is food, ale if there is ale, greenery, music, games, charity, and temporary release from the ordinary discipline of labor. The Lord may provide a feast. The church may be decorated. People may dance, sing, laugh, and drink too much, because joy in winter is not frivolous. It is medicine, but even celebration has limits. A good feast in December does not erase hunger in February. This is another thing to understand. Winter has a tail. The coldest hunger often arrives, not when the first snow falls, but later, when stored food has been eaten down, when animals are thinner, when the new growth has not yet come, and when everyone is beginning to count more carefully. The medieval year is a long financial calculation made in grain, animals, labor, weather, obligation, and luck. Harvest determines winter. A good harvest means full barns, better bread, stronger ale, healthier animals, more confidence. A bad harvest means everything tightens. Grain prices rise, bread gets darker and rougher, pottage gets thinner. Livestock may be slaughtered because there is not enough fodder to keep them alive, which means meat now and less wealth later. Every choice borrows from the future. There is a reason medieval people fear famine, with a seriousness modern people can barely imagine. Hunger is not an abstract issue, it is a neighbor's face changing shape. It is children becoming quiet. It is people eating seed grain and knowing exactly what that means. It is fields that should be future food becoming impossible because the future has been eaten. In winter, the barn is a bank. Grain is savings. A pig is savings. A cow is savings with legs and opinions. Chickens are small investments that complain. Tools are assets. Cloth is value. Wood is value. Salt is value. Time is value. The household economy is not separate from daily life. It is daily life. Every object has a history of labor behind it. Every broken object is a problem. Your shoes, for example, matter more than you think. Medieval footwear is not designed for your modern expectations. It can be leather, stitched, patched, often thin by modern standards, and vulnerable to wet. Wet feet in winter are not a mild inconvenience. Wet feet become cold feet. Cold feet slow work. Slowed work means less done. Less done means more risk. A hole in a shoe is a small disaster with toes attached. Clothing is layered for warmth, but the layers are heavy, itchy, smoky, and not easily washed. Wool is the great winter friend, imperfect but loyal. Linen under layers help. Cloaks, hoods, caps, wraps, mittens, stockings, whatever you can afford or make or inherit. Clothing is rarely just bought new for fun. It is made, altered, passed down, patched, turned, reused, and finally repurposed into something else. A garment may have several lives before it becomes rags. Color exists, more than some modern images of the Middle Ages suggest. People are not all walking around in mud brown like apologetic potatoes. Dyes can produce reds, greens, blues, yellows, though brightness and stability vary by cost. But winter wears everything down. Mud climbs hems, smoke stains sleeves, rain dulls cloth. The village in January is colorful in small stubborn ways. A hood, a ribbon, a painted church carving, a firelit face, a pot of dried herbs, the red of cold hands. Now consider work inside the house. Women in particular carry an enormous portion of winter labor. Cooking, brewing, childcare, dairying, Spinning, sewing, mending, washing, preserving, nursing the sick, managing stores, tending small animals, helping with field work when needed, and performing the emotional labor of keeping a household from collapsing into despair. The phrase women's work is often used as though it means light work. In a medieval village, that phrase should be handled carefully because much of civilization is sitting on it. Spinning alone can consume vast amounts of time. Thread does not simply appear. Cloth does not simply appear. Every woven piece begins with fiber that must be cleaned, carded, spun, and then woven. Winter evenings are perfect for spinning because they are long and indoors. But perfect here means necessary, not pleasant. The distaff and spindle are constant companions. A woman walking, watching children, talking, or resting may still be spinning. Idle hands are suspicious because textiles are hunger in another form. Clothing, bedding, trade, rent, status, survival. Men's winter work shifts too. There is wood to cut, tools to repair, animals to manage, carts to mend, hedges to lay, buildings to patch, manure to move, and obligations to fulfill. A peasant man may owe labor services to a lord, rents in cash or kind, and fees that feel invented specifically to remind him that freedom is complicated depending on period and place. The exact legal structure changes, but the basic sensation remains. Someone above you has claims on your labor. The Lord's manor is not just a big house somewhere nearby, it is an organizing force. Land, rents, courts, mills, ovens, rights, restrictions. You may be required to grind grain at the Lord's mill and pay for the privilege. You may owe fees for using certain resources. You may not be allowed to hunt freely in woods that look to your hungry eyes like they contain dinner. The medieval landscape is full of invisible lines drawn by law, custom, and power. Cross the wrong one, and the rabbit is not just a rabbit, it is evidence. Manorial courts handle disputes, fines, obligations, and the endless friction of village life. In winter, people may have more time to argue, but the arguments are rarely trivial. Boundaries, animals, debt, ale quality, inheritance, marriage agreements, broken fences, unpaid dues, insults, assaults, missing tools. A village court roll reads like a community breathing loudly through its problems. It is messy, human, repetitive, and deeply revealing. If you're new here, you would be bad at everything. This is not an insult. It is simply true. Modern competence does not transfer smoothly into medieval winter. You may know how to use a smartphone, send emails, edit videos, drive a car, and operate a microwave. Wonderful. Now milk this cow before sunrise while your fingers hurt and she's in the mood. Now identify which grain is spoiled. Now mend this shoe. Now predict weather from the sky. Birds, wind, and the ache in your neighbor's knee. Now bake bread in an oven whose temperature you cannot measure. Now keep a baby warm without overheating the room because there is barely a room to begin with. Medieval people are not stupid because they lack modern technology. They are highly skilled in ways that modern life has made optional. They know materials by touch. They know animals by behavior. They know when smoke means normal fire and when it means panic. They know which neighbor can be trusted with a secret and which one will turn it into public entertainment by sunset. They know how to stretch food, judge wood, patch, thatch, bargain, brew, preserve, pray, endure, and continue. Winter rewards knowledge that lives in the body. How to walk on ice while carrying a bucket. How to sleep in cold without waking stiff and useless. How close to sit to the fire without burning your clothes. How to dry damp wool without making the whole room smell like a wet sheep argument. How to tell whether a child is merely cold or becoming dangerously ill. How to decide whether to slaughter an animal now or risk feeding it longer. These decisions are not romantic. They are survival arithmetic. Animals are everywhere in this arithmetic. A medieval village is loud with non-human opinions. Cows, pigs, sheep, goats, chickens, geese, horses, oxen, dogs, cats, rats, mice, and the occasional creature nobody invited but everyone must deal with. In winter, animals need shelter and food. Fodder is limited. Hay must last. Straw must be managed. A sick animal can ruin a household's plan. A dead animal can be meat, grief, financial disaster, or all three. The pig is particularly important because pigs are practical creatures with terrible manners. They convert scraps and woodland mast into meat. In autumn, they may be driven into woods to feed on acorns and beech mast, if rights allow. In winter, slaughtering a pig is a major event. Meat must be salted, smoked, rendered, shared, stored. Nothing is wasted if people can help it. Fat is precious. Bones are useful. Blood can become food. Modern squeamishness is a luxury purchased by distance from hunger. Salt is crucial. Without refrigeration, preservation is a winter technology. Salting, smoking, drying, pickling, fermenting, storing in fat, keeping things cool in cellars or outbuildings. Every method has risks. Too little salt and meat spoils. Too much and it becomes hard to eat without soaking. Damp ruins stores. Rats find grain. Mold appears. A household's winter food supply is not simply stored and forgotten. It is watched like a sleeping child. Ale is safer than many water sources. Nourishing, social, and ordinary, small ale weaker than modern beer is consumed by adults and children in many places. Brewing is household labor, often women's labor, and the quality of ale matters enough that authorities regulate it. Bad ale is not just a disappointment, it is a small public issue. In winter, warm ale, spiced if possible, can be comfort. Comfort, again, is not extra. Comfort keeps people willing to continue. Now let us talk about the body in cold. Your body wants calories, lots of them. Working outdoors in winter burns energy. But winter food may be limited precisely when the body wants more. This creates one of the season's cruel little jokes. You need more fuel because it is cold, but you may have less food because it is winter. The body becomes slower, tempers shorten, illness spreads, small injuries heal badly, a cough becomes a concern, a fever becomes a story people tell carefully. Medieval medicine is not simply nonsense, though some of it will make you appreciate antibiotics with spiritual intensity. People use herbs, prayers, charms, diet, bloodletting, poultices, warming treatments, saints, midwives, wise women, barber surgeons, and whatever the local tradition offers. Some remedies help, some do nothing, some harm. The theory of humors shapes educated medicine with its concern for hot, cold, wet, and dry qualities. Winter, being cold and often wet, encourages certain interpretations of illness. Your modern immune system may have opinions, but it does not get to vote. The village healer, midwife, or experienced older woman may know a great deal through observation. Which plants soothe, which poultice draws infection, which fever is likely to break, which birth is going badly, which cough means trouble. Knowledge is local, practical, and often passed through women whose names rarely enter official records. History loves kings because kings hire scribes. Villages survive because unnamed people know what to do at 3 a.m. when a child cannot breathe. Childbirth in winter is frightening. Childbirth in any medieval season is frightening. But winter adds cold, darkness, travel difficulty, and infection risk. A midwife may need to reach a house through snow or mud. Water must be warmed, cloth must be clean enough. The mother must survive blood loss, fever, exhaustion. The baby must be kept warm and breathing. The whole household may hover between prayer and panic. If all goes well, the child is wrapped, named, baptized quickly, and folded into a world that will ask much of them before they can walk. Death is closer here, not melodramatically close, not constantly screaming from the corner, but present. The churchyard is nearby. People have lost siblings, children, parents, spouses. They understand grief as part of the weather of life. Winter may bring more deaths among the old, the very young, the already weak. A burial in frozen ground is difficult. The bell sounds, the village gathers. Life continues because animals still need feeding and the fire still needs tending. This is not hardness of heart. This is how grief survives when work cannot stop. And yet the village is not only misery. This is important. Historical hardship does not erase historical joy. People laugh, they flirt, they tease, they sing, they celebrate weddings. They tell rude jokes. They admire a well-made tool, a good loaf, a clever child, a strong animal, a clear winter sky. They enjoy warmth when they have it with a gratitude that may be sharper than ours because it is less guaranteed. A cup of hot pottage after freezing work is not boring, it is a small rescue. A winter market day, if roads allow, brings color and movement. People carry goods, news, rumors, complaints, prices, and possibilities. There may be cloth, Salt, ironware, spices for those who can afford them, fish, candles, pottery, tools, ribbons, cheap trinkets, and food. Markets are economic events, but also social ones. You see people from other villages, you hear news from towns, you learn who has died, married, quarreled, prospered, failed. The world briefly expands. The town, if you visit one, feels intense after the village. Narrow streets, more people, more smells, more trade, more danger, more opportunity. In winter, town streets can be slick with filth and ice. Buildings lean, signs creak, bells ring, traders shout, smoke rises. If you're a peasant with limited cash, the town is both tempting and threatening. Money leaves quickly there. So does innocence, according to every older person who has ever warned a younger one about cities. Back in the village, the Lord's obligations remain taxes, rents, tithes. The tithe owed to the church takes a portion of produce, rent to the Lord takes another. Fees appear at moments that already hurt. Marriage fees, inheritance fees, milling fees, oven fees, court fines. The medieval peasant is not simply poor because farming is hard. They are poor because systems are designed to extract. Some lords are harsher than others, some priests are kinder than others, but the structure is there, as steady as winter. If you're listening comfortably now, perhaps in a room with heat humming gently in the background, this is a good moment to appreciate the invisible kindness of pipes, wires, insulation, and grocery stores. Modern life has problems, many of them serious, but it has performed a miracle on winter. It has made survival boring for many people. That is not a small achievement. Medieval winter is what life looks like before survival becomes boring. Snow, when it comes, changes the village. It covers the mud, quiets the roofs, softens the lane, brightens the night. For a few hours, perhaps, the world looks clean. Children may enjoy it. Adults calculate it. How deep? How long? Will it block the road? Will animals reach water? Is the roof strong enough? Beauty is not absent, but it is always accompanied by practical questions. Wearing heavy boots. Ice is worse. Ice on paths. Ice on buckets. Ice on ponds. Ice at the edge of streams where water must still be fetched. Falling can break a wrist, a hip, a tooth. A broken bone in winter is a household crisis. Who will do the work? How will the injured person heal? Can they be moved? Can they earn? Modern medicine turns many injuries into inconvenience. Medieval winter turns inconvenience into consequences. Water is heavy. This is one of the most overlooked facts in history. Water is heavy, and someone has to carry it from a well, a stream, a spring, a pond. In winter, the source may be frozen or farther than you want. Buckets are awkward. Paths are slippery. Your arms ache. And after all that, the water must be used carefully. Drinking, cooking, washing, animals. Waste is foolish. Spillage is annoying. The simple modern act of turning a tap would look to many medieval households like sorcery or royal privilege. Firewood is also heavy. Wood must be cut, gathered, stacked, dried, carried. Rights to gather wood may be controlled. Dead wood may be allowed. Green wood forbidden, depending on local rules. A household that misjudges fuel needs suffers. Burning damp wood is smoky and inefficient. Burning too much early in winter is dangerous. Burning too little means cold. The hearth is a little economy of flame. Imagine the sound of chopping in the cold morning, the sharp strike of metal into wood, breath white in the air, shoulders moving under wool, chips scattering onto hard ground. The person chopping is not doing it for atmosphere. They are buying the evening with muscle. Each piece of wood is a future hour of warmth, a future meal, a future pot of water, a future circle of faces near the fire. The forest beyond the village is both resource and danger. It offers fuel, nuts, berries in season, grazing, timber, herbs, game if law and luck allow, and stories. It also offers wolves in some regions, outlaws in some stories, getting lost, falling branches, and the uneasy sense that human order thins among trees. Medieval forests are not simply scenic, they are legally complicated, economically important, and imaginatively powerful. In winter, with bare branches and snow, they can look like the bones of the year. Wolves, since we have mentioned them, occupy a large place in the medieval imagination. Actual danger varies by region and period, but the idea of the wolf is enormous. Hunger with teeth, wilderness at the boundary, the thing that takes sheep, the thing that waits beyond firelight. Whether or not a villager sees a wolf often, they live in a world where animals are not sentimental companions only. They are competitors, tools, wealth, danger, food, and sometimes friends. Dogs are useful. They guard, herd, warn, hunt where permitted, and live in that old uneasy partnership between affection and function. Cats manage rodents, if they feel like it, which is always the ancient condition of working with cats. Rats and mice are not minor inconveniences, they are thieves. They eat grain, spoil stores, spread filth, and reproduce with insulting confidence. A household's winter food supply has enemies with whiskers. Children learn early. Childhood exists, love exists, play exists, but responsibility arrives sooner. A child may watch younger siblings gather sticks, scare birds, tend animals, fetch water, spin, weed, carry, help. Play happens around work, between chores, with whatever is available: stones, sticks, scraps, snow, songs, imagination. A medieval child knows the household's vulnerabilities because they live inside them. They know when adults are worried, even if adults speak softly. Education varies. Some boys and fewer girls, depending on status and place, may learn reading through church or local arrangements. But most village knowledge is practical and oral. Memory matters, songs teach. Repetition teaches. Watching teaches. Mistakes teach with consequences. You learn the year by tasks: sowing, weeding, haymaking, harvest, slaughter, storage, winter repair. The calendar is not just dates, it is muscle memory. The priest may be one of the few literate people nearby, though not all priests are equally educated. He baptizes, marries, buries, preaches, collects, blesses, warns, mediates, and sometimes disappoints. The church is spiritual but also administrative. It records, if records are kept. It rings, gathers, judges, comforts, frightens. In winter, the church may be freezing, but it is also a place where villagers stand together and hear that their suffering is not meaningless, which may be as necessary as warmth. Medieval belief is not an accessory to life, it is the frame. Saints protect particular needs. Relics carry power. Prayers accompany danger. Holy water, charms, blessings, processions, confession, penance, fear of sin, hope of heaven. The boundary between physical and spiritual causes is not drawn where modern people draw it. A failed harvest may be weather, but weather itself may speak of divine displeasure. Illness may have natural causes, but natural causes do not exclude spiritual meaning. The world is layered. This layering can comfort and frighten. It means you are never alone. Saints and angels and the dead and demons and God are all present in ways that matter. It also means misfortune can feel like accusation. Why did the cow die? Why did the child sicken? Why did the roof burn? Medieval people ask practical questions, but also moral and spiritual ones. Winter, with its darkness and hunger, makes those questions louder. Superstition is a word modern people use too easily. It can flatten a whole worldview into a joke. Better to say that medieval villagers live in a world where uncertainty is constant and control is limited, so they use every tool available: prayer, observation, custom, ritual, medicine, luck, memory. When you cannot control much, patterns become important. A charm tied at the threshold may not pass a modern clinical trial, but neither does despair. Now, think of the weather not as background, but as government. Winter rules. It decides travel, work, hunger, illness, mood, and trade. A mild winter can save fodder and lives. A hard winter can consume everything. Too much rain rots. Too much frost kills. A thaw at the wrong time floods. A storm can isolate a village. The weather does not explain itself, does not negotiate, and does not care that you have already had a difficult week. There are no accurate forecasts. People read signs: the sky at sunset, the behavior of birds, the direction of wind, the halo around the moon, the depth of animal coats, the ache of old injuries. Some signs are useful, some are tradition wearing confidence. All of them matter because planning requires something, and something is better than blank fear. If a blizzard traps the village, people conserve. Doors stay shut, Animals are checked, fires are guarded, food is portioned, travel stops, news stops. The world shrinks to the walls around you and the few paths that can be cleared. Time becomes slow, children become restless, adults become sharp. The same story is told again because new events are temporarily unavailable. And then, when the weather breaks, everyone emerges into a bright, damaged world. Roofs are checked, fences repaired, animals counted, paths opened, neighbors visited. Who is sick? Who needs help? Who lost what? Community after a storm is not sentimental, it is inventory with compassion. Medieval villages also understand debt in ways that modern people might find uncomfortably familiar. Borrow grain now, repay after harvest. Owe labor, owe rent, owe favors, owe a neighbor who helped when your roof leaked. Owe the miller, the Lord, the church, the family of your future spouse. Money may be scarce, but obligation circulates constantly. Reputation is credit. Lose trust, and winter becomes colder. Marriage is partly affection, partly alliance, partly labor arrangement, partly property question, partly survival strategy. A good spouse is not simply someone you love, though love may be present. A good spouse can work, manage, endure, produce, cooperate, and fit into networks of kin and obligation. Winter reveals the quality of a household. It shows who complains, who contributes, who shares, who breaks, who holds. Old people hold memory. They remember bad winters, good harvests, outbreaks, disputes, prices, marriages, betrayals, storms, and the year the river froze so hard carts crossed it. Their knowledge may be invaluable, but their bodies are vulnerable. A household with an elderly member must balance care and scarcity. This is not a cold calculation because love is involved. It is worse, a warm calculation under pressure. The medieval poorhouse as a modern institution does not exist in the same form everywhere. Charity is local, religious, uneven. Monasteries, churches, guilds, neighbors, kin networks, and lords may provide aid, but nothing is guaranteed. A person without family, land, work, or health is in grave danger. Winter exposes the edges of the social fabric. Some are caught, some fall through monasteries, where nearby may be important sources of charity, medicine, literacy, and storage. They are also landholders, employers, and sometimes resented powers. A monastery in winter is a place of routine. Bells, prayers, work, manuscripts, kitchens, infirmary, guests, stores. The monastic day is structured against chaos. For villagers, that structure may seem both holy and comfortable, though monks and nuns have their own cold corridors, strict schedules, and earthly problems. Travelers in winter are suspicious or pitied, depending on who they are. A merchant with goods, a pilgrim, a messenger, a wandering laborer, a beggar, a runaway, a soldier, a stranger with news. Inns exist, but they are not the cozy fantasy tavern you may imagine. They are crowded, smoky, noisy, and not always safe. Sharing beds with strangers is not unusual. Fleas are democratic. Theft is possible. Food is variable. Ale helps. If a traveler brings news, the village listens. War somewhere, a new tax, a royal death, a strange birth, a miracle, a plague rumor, prices in town, a bridge out, a hanging. News travels at hoof speed, foot speed, market speed, church speed. By the time it arrives, it may be altered, embroidered, misunderstood, or improved for dramatic effect. The medieval village has misinformation. It just has better scenery. Plague, depending on date and place, may haunt memory. After the Black Death in the mid-14th century, many villages carry absence, empty houses, fields abandoned, families reduced, wages shifting, labor suddenly more valuable in some regions, lords anxious, workers more assertive. The plague is not a single event neatly contained in a textbook. It is a wound in population, memory, economy, and imagination. Winter after plague must have felt especially strange in places where the fires of neighbors no longer burned. If our imagined village is late 1300s England, for example, the social world after plague is unstable in ways that matter. Labor shortages give some peasants bargaining power. Laws attempt to freeze wages and restrict movement. Tensions rise. Revolts become possible. The great events of history emerge from ordinary people deciding that the terms are no longer acceptable. Even sleepy villages contain politics, but tonight we stay small. We stay with the winter house, the pot, the fire, the frozen lane, the old woman spinning, the child asleep against the dog, the man checking the roof, the girl carrying water, the priest coughing, through morning mass, the cow shifting in straw, the moon over the fields, the barn door tied against the wind. There is a beautiful harshness to this world. Beautiful not because suffering is beautiful, but because attention reveals texture. The way frost gathers on thatch, the way smoke smells different when the wood is apple, oak, or damp hedge, the way a rushlight makes a clay pot look golden, the way people lean toward heat, the way a village at night is mostly darkness, except for tiny leaks of orange under doors, each one a household insisting it is still here. If you were dropped into this village, you would fail at first. Of course you would. You would be cold, hungry, confused, embarrassed by your useless hands, frightened by the dark, overwhelmed by smells and emotionally damaged by the bathroom situation. You would miss your mattress with religious intensity. You would dream of hot showers. You would not know how to cut wood efficiently, how to tend a hearth overnight, how to judge grain, how to mend a wool hose, how to speak carefully enough in a village that remembers everything. But human beings adapt. That is our oldest talent. After a while, perhaps you would learn. You would learn the path to the well by foot memory. You would learn which neighbor laughs before they help, and which helps before they laughs. You would learn the sound of good firewood. You would learn to sleep through animal noises and wake at the wrong kind. You would learn the taste of thin pottage and the glory of thick pottage. You would learn that a warm corner is a treasure. You would learn the winter calendar, the early cold when stores still feel generous, the deep cold when everyone becomes careful, the late hunger when spring is visible but not yet useful, the first green shoots that people greet not with poetic delight but with the practical joy of bodies that need vitamins, the first eggs after scarcity, the first milk improving, the first day warm enough to work without feeling personally attacked by the air. Spring, when it comes, is not a postcard. It is mud, labor, risk, and relief. Fields must be prepared. Animals recover. Roofs are repaired. Bodies emerge from winter thinner and eager. The sun begins to stay longer. The village expands outward. Doors open. Children run. Old disputes resume because human nature has survived alongside everyone else. That is perhaps the deepest truth of medieval winter. It ends. Not always kindly. Not for everyone. Not without loss. But it ends often enough that people build their lives around endurance. They store, repair, pray, share, ration, work, and wait. Winter is not conquered. It is outlasted. And there is dignity in outlasting. Not the dramatic dignity of statues and speeches. The smaller dignity of keeping the fire alive, of giving a child the larger piece, of carrying water on ice because the animals need it, of patching a sleeve again because cloth is valuable, of sitting in the dark and telling a story because someone is afraid, of waking in cold and beginning anyway. This kind of history can feel quiet, but it is not small. Most human lives have been lived closer to this than to palaces. Most people in the past were not rulers or conquerors. They were sleepers under wool, workers in weather, keepers of fires, makers of bread, carriers of water, rememberers of storms. Their names are mostly gone, but their labor is not. It is in the fields, the hedges, the roads, the church stones, the old village shapes still visible in landscapes if you know how to look. Tonight, as you lie somewhere warmer than they could have imagined, you might think of them kindly, not as simple, not as dirty little figures in the background of more important stories, but as skilled, tired, funny, anxious, stubborn human beings who knew winter intimately and faced it without the protections we barely notice. Think of the woman at the hearth, lifting the pot with cloth wrapped around her hands. Think of the man at the woodpile, breath white, shoulders aching. Think of the child pushing frozen straw with a boot. Think of the old person near the fire, eyes half closed, hearing in the wind the winter from 50 years before. Think of the cow in the byre, the grain in the chest, the rushlight trembling, the church bell calling through cold air. The modern world is loud. It shouts schedules, messages, alerts, opinions, prices, emergencies, and little bright rectangles of urgency. The medieval village shouts too sometimes, of course. People shout at animals, children, neighbors, weather, and probably at doors that will not close. But winter also teaches slowness because it leaves no choice. The dark comes early, the fire takes time, bread takes time, healing takes time, spring takes time. So let the past slow you down a little. Let the frozen lane be far away, but real. Let the smoky room be uncomfortable, but human. Let the village sleep under thatch and stars. Let the last ember glow beneath ash. Let someone wake before dawn and breathe life into it again. You would not last one winter in a medieval village. Not at first, almost none of us would, but they did. Year after year, ordinary people did the impossible so often that it became ordinary. They survived the cold. They counted the grain. They carried the water. They buried their dead. They celebrated when they could. They complained, laughed, worked, prayed, and waited for the thaw. And now, centuries later, their winter has become our story. So rest now. You're warm, the fire is kept, the door is barred, the animals are quiet. Outside the moon is over the fields. The village is breathing in its sleep. And somewhere under the ash, a small red ember is still alive. If you are still awake, and there is no hurry not to be, let us go deeper into one ordinary winter day and follow it almost hour by hour. Not because anything dramatic happens, but because the absence of drama is the point. In the modern world, we tend to think of history as the big thing that interrupts daily life. A war, a king, a plague, a rebellion. But for the people inside history, daily life is history. The ordinary day is where the century actually lives. Before dawn, the first job is the fire. Someone, often the woman who manages the hearth, kneels in front of the ashes and searches for the buried glow. If she finds it, the day begins with relief. She feeds it carefully with dry scraps, then kindling, then small wood, blowing gently, not too hard, because a weak ember can be offended by enthusiasm. Smoke thickens, a flame appears. The house exhales. If she does not find an ember, the day begins badly. Flint and steel, dry tinder, and patience must replace what should have been saved. A dead hearth in winter is not the end of the world, but it feels like criticism. The pot goes on. Pottage is not a single recipe, but a whole category of survival. It may be made with peas, beans, leeks, onions, cabbage, oats, barley, herbs, scraps of meat if available, bones if lucky, and whatever the household has that can be boiled into submission. It changes with season and wealth. The pottage of a good year is thick and respectable. The pottage of a bad year has the watery sadness of a rumor about food. But even thin pottage warms the hands around the bowl, and in winter warmth is part of the meal. Bread is the other pillar. Dark bread, coarse bread, maslin bread made from mixed grains, rye bread in some regions, barley or oat cakes where wheat is too costly or difficult. White wheat bread is for the better off, a signal as much as a food. The poor may eat bread so dark and heavy that it seems less baked than carved. If grain has been stretched with peas or beans, the texture tells you before anyone confesses. If ergot or mold has touched the grain, the bread may carry danger invisible until eaten. Medieval hunger is not only about having too little, it is also about eating what you should not have to eat. The household eats quickly because morning work is waiting. Animals cannot be told that the family is tired. A cow must be milked, chickens let out or fed, pigs checked, sheep counted if they are nearby, water carried, ice broken. The buyer smells strongly of animal heat, dung, straw, and breath. It is not pleasant exactly, but compared with the outside air, it can feel almost luxurious. Animals generate warmth. This is one reason some households keep them close, sometimes under the same roof in a divided space. Modern noses object, medieval bodies appreciate the heat. A cow in winter is a serious responsibility. She needs fodder, water, shelter, and watching. Milk output may drop. If she calves, everything becomes more complicated. If she sickens, worry spreads. A cow is not just a cow. She is milk, butter, cheese, manure, status, security, and future calves. Losing her is losing part of the household's stability. When people in old stories weep over livestock, they are not being silly. They are watching wealth die. Manure, while we are here, deserves more respect than it usually receives. Medieval farming depends on returning fertility to soil, and animal waste is central. In winter, manure piles accumulate, steam, freeze, thaw, smell, and wait for their future role in the fields. It is easy to imagine the medieval village as dirty, because it is full of waste. But waste is also resource. Straw bedding mixed with dung becomes future growth. The village economy is circular long before anyone uses that word in a grand proposal. By mid-morning, if the weather allows, people go to outdoor tasks. The fields in winter may look empty, but they are not forgotten. Winter grain may be growing slowly under the cold. Fences and hedges need attention. Ditches must drain if they are not frozen. Firewood must be gathered or cut. A broken gate cannot wait until spring if animals are escaping. The landscape requires maintenance even when it seems asleep. Hedge laying is one of those tasks that sounds decorative to modern ears and is in fact practical engineering. A hedge is not simply a row of plants. It is a living fence, a boundary, a windbreak, a stock barrier, a source of wood, habitat, and a sign of rights. It needs cutting and bending in skilled ways so it grows thick and strong. A well-laid hedge is labor turned into landscape. A neglected hedge is a future argument with animals and neighbors. Tool repair fills many winter hours. A broken handle, a dull blade, a cracked yoke, a damaged cartwheel, a loose hinge. Iron is expensive. Wood must be shaped. Leather must be patched. Rope made or mended. Nothing is disposable in the modern sense. An object is repaired until repair becomes impossible, and then its remaining parts are salvaged. The idea of throwing away something merely because it is ugly would seem not only wasteful, but possibly immoral. At midday, the sun is at its highest and still not very warm. Work pauses for food, if there is food: bread, cheese, pottage, ale, onions, maybe a little fish or smoked meat. People eat with knives, fingers, wooden bowls, trenchers in some contexts. The meal is not separated from the room the way modern dining can be. It happens near work, near animals, near tools, near children, near smoke. Life is not divided into clean categories. Cooking, warming, sleeping, repairing, and talking all crowd around the same central heat. Children are everywhere underfoot, unless they are old enough to be useful, in which case they are everywhere underfoot while being useful. A small child may be wrapped close to an older sibling or grandmother. A toddler near a hearth is a constant hazard. Burns are common. Sore falls, cuts, coughs, stomach illnesses, and all the little accidents that become serious when medicine is limited. Childhood in this world is loved fiercely and threatened constantly. A mother may have lost children already. This is one of the hardest truths to hold gently. Medieval families do not love less because death is common. They love in a world where death is common that may make love sharper, more anxious, more practical. A child who survives infancy is a relief renewed daily. A child who reaches working age becomes part of the household's strength. But no child is simply labor. The lullabies, toys, scoldings, stories, and tiny shoes found in archaeological contexts remind us that affection leaves traces too. Afternoon comes early. The light begins to thin before you're emotionally ready. Outdoor work must be finished while eyes can still see footing. Animals brought in, wood carried, doors secured, water stored. Anything left outside may be ruined, stolen, frozen, or transformed overnight into a problem with consequences. The medieval evening is a closing of the fences. Inside, the house becomes louder for a while. People return with cold bodies and wet hems. There is stamping, shaking, complaining, arranging, feeding, warming. Someone's shoes need drying. Someone's temper needs managing. The pot is stirred. The fire is fed. A child is told to stop poking the ashes. The same child immediately considers poking the ashes again because history is cyclical. If the household owns a table, stools, benches, chests, and a decent bed, it is doing relatively well. Furniture is limited, heavy and useful. Chests store clothing, documents, if any, valuables, tools, or food. Beds are prized. Straw mattresses can be refreshed when straw is available. Blankets and coverlets are wealth you sleep under. A bed can be inherited with the seriousness of land. To own warm bedding is to own a form of winter security. The best bed in the house may belong to the married couple, but sharing is common. Servants, children, siblings, and guests may sleep where there is space. Bodies are heat. Modern people often interpret bed sharing only through intimacy, but in cold households it is also efficiency. A lonely bed in winter is a waste of warmth, unless you're rich enough to afford loneliness. Night food is similar to morning food, perhaps a little more substantial if work was heavy. The medieval diet is often monotonous by modern standards, but not necessarily flavorless. Herbs matter. Onions, garlic, leeks, parsley, sage, thyme, mustard, vinegar, ale, salt and smoke all shape taste. Spices from long-distance trade exist but are expensive. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and such belong more to wealthier tables. For peasants, flavor is local, seasonal, and practical. When meat appears, it may be deeply appreciated. Salted pork, bacon, sausage, smoked fish, dried fish, perhaps rabbit where permitted or acquired quietly, poultry on special occasions, beef when an animal must be slaughtered. Fresh meat is more common around slaughter season. Winter preservation gives meat a strong presence in colder months for households that can afford it. But meat is not the daily centerpiece for most peasants. Grain is, after eating, tasks continue. Spinning, mending, sharpening, carving, teaching, nursing, planning. The evening is not leisure in the modern sense. It is lower light labor. A man may carve a peg or mend a harness. A woman may spin or patch linen. An older child may twist cord. Someone may check stores. Someone may count aloud in their head because the household's future has to fit into the remaining sacks. Counting is a winter habit, not always with written numbers, but with eyes and hands. How much grain left? How much salt? How many onions? How much hay? How much candle? How much patience? A medieval winter trains the mind to measure. Waste is not a personality quirk, it is an enemy. Generosity exists, but it is meaningful because resources are finite. Sharing a loaf when loaves are few is not politeness, it is moral courage. Now imagine a neighbor knocks. This is a sound that can mean many things. A visit, a request, a warning, a birth, a death, a rumor, a need for fire. Borrowed embers are one of the oldest neighborhood connections. If your hearth dies in your neighbor's lives, you may carry coals carefully from their fire to yours. There is something beautiful in that. The literal transfer of warmth from one household to another. Also, if you have been a terrible neighbor, this is the moment you regret it. The winter village depends on small reciprocities. Borrowing a tool, watching a child, helping with an animal, sharing news, lending grain, joining to repair damage. These acts are not all pure kindness. They are social investments. You help because you may need help. You share because reputation matters. You show up because absence will be remembered. Community is love mixed with surveillance and necessity. I hope you've fallen asleep by now. Sweet dreams, and see you in the next video.